Good evening to everyone. We are celebrating today the birth centenary of Fidel Castro, the first centenary of Fidel, because I am pretty sure that in 100 years, new generations are going to gather in one activity to celebrate the second centenary of Fidel Castro, because his idea will continue guiding the new generations for the freedom, for independence, for just social justice. Fidel for Cubans is not a name, even it's not a person. Fidel is a moral reference to all the Cuban revolutionaries. Every day when we wake up, we think our first thought is to Fidel. What can we do in order to continue facing the imperialism, in order to assure the victory over all this policy of aggression, hostility towards our country? And the current Cuban generations are guided by his ideas. But Fidel's thoughts are more important now than ever, because the current situation that we are facing in Cuba is under unprecedented limits. Not ever before Cuba has been submitted to this strong economic, commercial, financial, and media war against our country. Because this administration in the United States is guided by some extreme right concepts. They are disregarding the international law. They are not taking care of the international law or the principle contained in the United Nations chapter, the respect for the self-determination, the territorial integrity of the countries, the right of self-determination of the country to their political, economic, and social system. But also they are guided by the idea, this concept that they have developed, peace through force. What does it mean, peace through force? It reminds me the time of the Roman Empire, to conquest territory, to submit people, to make new slaves, and we cannot accept it. The world cannot accept it. I'm not talking about Cuba. Not any other country could accept the concept of peace through wars. Also, this concept of the Monroe Doctrine that they are recovering now. The Monroe Doctrine means that the Western Hemisphere is under the zone of influence of the US, and all the strategic resources of the Western Hemisphere belongs to the US, it's clear. And they are against any government that has its own path to development and is against their own interests or the US interests. It's clear. And also, Dr. Sonia mentioned the new Marxism that they are developing now. They said that Cuba is the capital of the communism in the 21st century. Well, they are using this pretext and also saying that Cuba is the extreme left forces in order to persecute all the social movement, the progressive movement, the communist parties, the socialist parties, including within US. It's in a message. This message is mainly within US to the different forces in US that are facing this extreme right government in his country. It is the different ideas that is guiding this administration, and why they are trying to strengthen the blockade towards Cuba. Nowadays, we are suffering, as you know, different, more than 100 measures that has been taken during this administration in less than 1 year, and they are trying to target the main income, financial income of the Cuban economy. We are talking about, for example, tourism. Before COVID, we were almost to reach 5 million visitors in Cuba. And now, this year, we are not going to reach 1 million because of all these attempts to avoid any travel to Cuba from not only from US, even from other countries, imposing sanctions to all the people that are traveling to Cuba. That is against the right of the US citizens, but also to the other citizens from other countries as well. There, as it was explained here, they impose a blockade to all supply to Cuba. And the oil supply means less electricity power. And we are suffering these blackouts in our country because we don't have the capacity to produce electricity because of the lack of oil in our country. We were depending from import oil from Venezuela, from Mexico, from Russia. They made this military aggression to Venezuela, the illegal military aggression to Venezuela, kidnapped the president, and imposed also the limitation to sell oil to our country. Also in Mexico, in the case of Russia, they are threatening with 25% of tariff to those countries who sell oil to Cuba. And the situation that we are facing today with lack of oil and the electricity supply has a huge impact in all the Cuban society. We are talking, for example, about the healthcare system in Cuba. We are now more than 110,000 medical surgeries that is pending because of lack of electricity in the hospital. We have the infant mortality that we always have been very proud because we have the rate of from 4 to 5% per 1,000 births in Cuba is better than the US and many other Western countries, and today is almost 10%. We are talking about human life that we cannot save because of the policy. Or for example, the survival of those children living with cancer that require some treatments before was 85%, and today is 65%. So drove 20 points, and we are talking also about life and many others, because the sanctions doesn't affect the leaders or the member of the party or the member of the government, affect all the society, and mainly pregnancy women, children with things, people with some chronic disease that are suffering the consequence of this policy. So what is the scenarios they are looking for, the US? I'm asking myself. First, well, they are looking for a color revolution in Cuba. You know, the people cannot resist the pressure of this economic situation, and they are going to mobilize against the government. At the same time, they are developing a media campaign trying to focus our government like a responsible for this situation that the people are suffering. It's a double standard speech, because you cannot suffocate the economy of Cuba and then you say that the government is responsible for this situation that we are suffering. But the people of Cuba is very clear that the main responsibility of the situation that we are suffering now in Cuba is the blockade from the US, because the people understand very well what the revolution has meant for them. The revolution has, as I was mentioning, the right for education, for health, the right for housing, the right for practicing sport, the culture, the dignity of a country, to have a job, the equal gender, the gender equality in the country, against all this policy of racism that was developed in Cuba before the revolution. So the Cuban revolution means social justice to everyone. And the people are very clear that without the revolution, we are going to a society that we already left before the revolution, when the 80% of the most productive land in Cuba belongs to the US companies. And the same happening in all the economic sector of our country. The second they are looking is Cuba to surrender to US. We cannot resist the pressure. Please, you decide who is going to lead our country, which government you want. We can submit all the economic sector to the US companies, but this is not going to happen. Cuban population are very proud of the history that took more than 100 years fighting against the Spaniard colonialism and against the US occupation 5 years and the neo-colonial system that we suffered until the victory of the Cuban Revolution on January 1st. And then a military aggression. There is a threat of military aggression to Cuba. It could happen. It could happen. Because they are repeating every day that they are going to take Cuba, that they can devastate Cuba, that all the options are on the table. We don't want a war. The Cuban population doesn't want a confrontation with US. We are prepared to any scenario. Nobody can think that Cuba is looking for the peace and not prepared for a war. We are prepared, but we are not looking for a war. It's clear. When Sonia mentioned the military aggression to Venezuela and the way they kidnapped the legal president Nicolás Maduro and his wife, 32 Cubans fell in combat, confronting the US military aggression. They fulfilled their duties to protect the life of the president Nicolás Maduro. Imagine what could happen in Cuba with million people with weapons defending our homeland. These people that are determined even to die if it is necessary in order to preserve our independence. So they should think on this, because a war against Cuba will mean to lose many human life, Cubans, but also American life. And they will devastate also the region, because Cuba is not alone. Maybe Cuba doesn't have the support of some governments, but you can believe that Cuba has the support of the people, because the people are in solidarity with Cuba. During this day, we have seen many people on the street demanding the end of the blockade, sending support to Cuba, humanitarian support to our country, mobilizing the financial resources here in India. Last year, I remember the National Committee in Solidarity with Cuba launched a campaign to collect monetary funds for Cuba. And there was more than 300,000 euros. I remember here, Rahimi, that during our presence here last year, also you were talking to the government, and they hand over here a check for the Cuban 2.5 million rupees for Cuba. And this delegation that went to Cuba to attend the colloquium of the first international colloquium, Fidel, Legacy and Future, all of them bring with them more than 10 kilos of medicines, and they are going to hand over to the oncologic hospital, and the other one is and cardiology hospital in Havana, in order to save life. It is the meaning of solidarity, where the people mobilize their efforts, collect their financial support in order to support Cuba. Is what Cuba has done in all these 65 years. We have sent doctors, we have sent soldiers in order to support the liberation movement in Africa. And we are very grateful for this also support to Cuba in this precise moment. Well, my friends, Fidel, as I mentioned, is present in our revolution every day. And we are guided by his ideas that only the socialism could preserve the independence, the sovereignty of our country. Until victory, always